Okay, so week 4, we're going to start with a new group of data, a new data set this week. I'm going to show you how to get there. First, you're reading, you're going to look at the Schindler book and then this process improvement Lean Six Sigma. We're going to look at this mostly just for your reflection piece, but I think it's interesting. A lot of companies will use this language. For example, Agile or Waterfall, they'll use this language with their data projects in addition to their technology projects. And it's probably because this is typically the same group of people are doing the same type of projects. So you'll see a lot of these different phrases in this document. I just want you to become familiar with it and then brainstorm which type of project would work best for what we're doing here in class. But let's jump over here to our modules and get into your data. Okay, look at the essay. And we have all of the data now is located in this files section for the rest of the class. You have alpha and you have omega. So that's basically what we're going to use. We're going to start out with alpha. And you'll see that you have some documents. They're CSV files. So let's go ahead and pull that down. Okay, so it's not much. In fact, that's what this is titled, a little bit of data. And the reason I'm giving you this first is that sometimes when we're working with an organization, whether it's a church or a company, even if it's your own family, household project, you may have a little bit of data to work with, and that's okay. We can work with any amount of data, but this gives you a chance to get started with data that actually came from a church. This is one church's worth of data. I've masked all the information so you can't see what church this is at, but this is a project where we reached out to several churches, asked them if we could help them with their with their strategic planning, and then ask them for data. When we receive the data back, sometimes it's messy, sometimes it's non-existent, sometimes there's a ton of data that we have to make sense of. So in this first, week 4, we're going to just look at a little bit of data. So you can see they have what year it was, how many people were baptized, and so forth. Now, I'd suggest go ahead and download this so that it's easier to read. So let's do that. Okay, so on your main page here in Canvas, just tell it to download. You might as well go ahead and tell each one of these to download. And this is typical. You'll oftentimes get several separate Excel spreadsheets to look at. And this makes it a bit cumbersome for us, just because you have to piece it all together if you're going to do comparisons side by side, but it gives you a starting place. So let's go ahead and open this data set. So this is their current membership data set. And let's enlarge this. Okay, so we've got it separated by several different ways. You've got baptism, prior to baptism. This is basically how the person came to them as a new member. So was it a transfer off their old system, somebody that was there, left and came back, a profession of faith, a prior transfer, and so on. So although we don't know exactly what all these terms mean, that's something that you can think through of. That we need to have logical, intuitive naming conventions to make sure that if somebody's working on the data today and then they leave in 5 years, the new person in 5 years can pick it up and this would make sense. So that's one recommendation. This also lets you see when the member came. Now you'll notice there's some different types of dates in here. So these are things that would have to be cleaned up. I don't think they came over in 1800, so I would assume that's something we could just blank out. Let's go ahead and take a look here. Make sure they look like they're in a logical order. And let's take a look at this. So there's quite a few. This was probably just a generic date they put in for people they didn't know. So I'd recommend just getting rid of that. And then you'll have logical dates for most, and then quite a few with blanks. And that's okay. I'd rather have, a blank date than the wrong date. All right, so let's look at the next data set that came through. Let's see here. Okay, so this is a 5-year comparison. Now we need to kind of open this up and see what they are comparing to. So their beginning count for the year, baptism, profession of faith. So this is kind of the activity that would have happened during the year, and then the end count. So this is telling us then, did they have more or less members by the end of the year? And it looks like in 2019, they had fewer. They ended with 292 out of 302. But this is something you could put together, put a nice graph together. Now to do it, you'd have to maybe take, let's see here. Let's take these two columns, move it here. We don't really need to know all the details of who did what, but if we put it together like this, and we'd actually take this row off, then you could put this together in a nice little graph. And let's do insert charts. We can look at recommended charts. And here you can see different charts like this. And this is year by year. So your first year here would be the 2017 year. You could tell it to put the labels on it. If we do it like this, it might do it for us. So insert recommended charts. Yep, see how it puts the labels on it if we include those dates. Always change your title here. So this might be well, let's just call it annual membership, something like that. And then you can see, okay, so we ended with more people in 2017, more people in 18, fewer people in 19, and more people in 20. Wow, that's pretty interesting. Okay, so that's just something that you can play with. Then you could use this information in the middle here to add the narrative to your document to say, oh, okay, this is why we had more people, or why we had fewer people. All right, so let's look at this one here. This one's called a 5-year comparison by quarter. So you'll see you have 2017 broken down into 4 quarters and so on. So this just gives you a little bit more information. And then church attendance is the next document. Again, you might want to check, do data and filter, check to see if we have dates everywhere that we're supposed to have dates. And we do. And okay, so they have this broken down into weekly church service. The only difference here is that this last one, they call it something different. So for consistency, we'd want to change that, make sure that it's all consistently named. Might seem minor, but in the broad scheme of things, we need to make sure that that's consistently named. All right. And an easy way to do that is just drag that down. Okay. Now, all of these files basically give you a little bit of information about the church. If you wanted to compare, let's say, your weekly church attendance to the overall number of members, you'd have to splice and dice these so that you could get them all onto one Excel spreadsheet. So that's an idea. The other thought is, these different naming conventions. Those are things that could be changed. This last spreadsheet here lets you know who the members are, basically, and what their status is. So we've got some that show deceased. I'm assuming that might be their date of death, and then their date of baptism, and so on. So we're assuming this person ID, that these are all unique identifiers. So these are 37 different people. We can see some demographics here. Males and females, the age ranges. We've got some teenagers up to age 90, but we have a lot of blanks. So that would be a recommendation I'd have to the church that, well, we need to be consistent with filling in the data. The other piece is there's only 37 rows here, but on the other document, it showed we had 300 people. So we would want like a full list of all the people in the church, their age, their gender, and instead of age, maybe even a date of birth. So that way they don't have to update this every single year to put in the correct age. All right, well, that's about it. So this lets you see this little bit of data. So what you're gonna do in Canvas, let's go back to Canvas here, is to do an essay. And in your essay, let's go back. In your essay, you will talk about this little bit of data. Like, is this meaningful for us? Let me just go ahead and go back in here. Is this little bit of data meaningful for us? Is it something, if you were the business analyst, you could do anything with this little bit of data? If so, what could you do? And then what recommendations? Sometimes we get this little bit of data and then we can take that, go back to the church or whoever hired you to do this and say, well, this is what you've given me, and give them a nice synopsis of what they provided. You could do that in a with bar charts or some sort of data visualization with a small consulting report type document to say, this is what you gave me. Now, these are the ideas that I have for the future. And then list maybe 10 points of what you could do. So that's something you can talk about in the essay. You don't have to do that consulting report right now, but talk about that in the essay. We're just looking for about 5 pages. Again, that's a cover page and reference page. And then briefly describe this project with the available information that you have. So you don't have a lot of available information, but what would you actually do with this if a client came to you and said, this is all I have, what can you do? How can you make our church better? And then you can use that language from the Six Sigma toolkit to talk about practical implications with this research project. So perhaps we'd want to do an agile project where we're getting the information that we have, but we want to have room to pivot. If they finally come in and say, hey, this is great information about our membership, our attendance, but really we need to know about money. And so we need to know, how much money are we getting? Where's the money going? Well, we don't have any information about their budget, about their expenses or their income. So those are things that we could quickly pivot to say, oh, well, let me see your checking account or your ledger, or do you have a box of receipts? Those sorts of things. All right, so the week 4 essay should be fairly easy for you. You need to put on your creative hat with this one and think outside the box. And that's part of being a business analyst, is you don't always get all the information that you want or you need, but you need to be able to take what you're given and then make something useful of that so you can ask very good questions. All right, have a great day.